However, the splitting of the moon was not an isolated event. On that night, and at that moment, it was visible, albeit not worldwide, in many places. The moon is famously not perceived equally by all peoples of the earth. A lunar eclipse can be visible in one country, while remaining invisible in another. Sometimes it is partial, sometimes total. In a captivating Indian tradition, the story unfolds of King Chakravarti Farmad in South India, who is said to have closely witnessed the fascinating splitting of the moon. Later, he received news of a new prophet from Arabia who was believed to have split the moon. This mysterious incident captivated his curiosity, and he felt drawn to the events of that night. Eventually, he had seen the splitting of the moon with his own eyes. The power and truth of this incredible phenomenon deeply convinced him, and his heart underwent a decisive transformation. King Farmad is said to have thoroughly researched the new prophet and followed the events in Arabia before making the final decision to convert to Islam. From that moment on, his fascinating journey into a new world of faith and spirituality began. It is said that the splitting of the moon laid the foundation for the emergence of the first Muslim enclave in the Indian subcontinent, leaving a lasting impression on the history and people of the region. The splitting of the moon, however, was not the last miracle that Prophet Muhammad would perform and experience throughout his life. Over the years, Islam spread, and the number of Muslims steadily increased. However, parallel to this growth, the oppression against them intensified. The idolaters decided to boycott the Muslims. This meant that no one was allowed to trade with the Muslims, let alone help them. No one was allowed to have contact with a Muslim. Essentially, Muslims were excluded from society. These boycott rules were solemnly recorded and sealed in a parchment placed in the Kaaba. However, this also turned in favor of the Muslims. Prophet Muhammad prophesied the destruction of the sealed decree, even though he was not in Mecca and could not peek into the sealed decree. At that time, the Prophet, along with the believers, was outside Mecca on a mountain path, where they had moved due to increasing oppression. There, they lived in poverty and under extremely difficult conditions. When the idolaters heard about the prophecy, they gathered to look for the decree and find out if there was any truth to the Prophet's prophecy.
Everyone is present. Let us now take the decree from the Kaaba.
When they retrieved and opened the sealed decree from the Kaaba, they found only a parchment eaten by worms, where all the letters and words were destroyed, except for the name of the Almighty God, Allah. The idolaters had to admit that their measure was unsuccessful. Whether in large-scale dealings or everyday matters, things always inclined in favor of the Muslims. The worm-eaten and destroyed decree was thus declared null and void, but the negative attitude towards Muslims persisted. Many years passed, and Prophet Muhammad tirelessly preached, proclaiming the verses, the words of God, revealed to him by the angel Gabriel. The verses addressed various topics and were revealed based on different events. Sometimes they were advice, sometimes comparisons and warnings, and sometimes clear commands from the Almighty God. Yet they were all unique, words of the highest poetry. Even the most esteemed poets of his time were overwhelmed. When reciting these words, even the hostile unbelievers fell silent. Islam gained more and more followers. Even people from entirely different tribes joined the Prophet. The impressive words could touch even the stony hearts of the rejectors. But for the Prophet, another miracle was yet to come. A miracle that transcended the boundaries of our known reality. One night, Prophet Muhammad was taken from his bed and brought to Jerusalem with a special being named Burak, apparently from another dimension. In the presence of the Archangel Gabriel, he ascended from there into the heavens, a journey that surpassed the limits of imagination and revealed the divine connection of the Prophet with a higher reality. Although this event is referred to as the Ascension, it becomes evident that it was an experience far beyond merely traversing clouds. The fact that the Archangel Gabriel could no longer accompany the Prophet from a certain point, and the Prophet continued the journey alone, suggests that it was a voyage into another dimension beyond our universe and our physical laws. The Ascension was an unparalleled adventure where space and time seemed to lose their usual rules. The Prophet traversed 7 mysterious spheres until he finally reached the gate, or what we might call today, the portal, to the secret of all secrets. In this breathtaking journey, he experienced an incomparable abundance of impressions. The spheres revealed to him countless angels in various forms. He encountered the prophets Jesus, Moses, Andrew, Noah, Abraham, and many others who came before him. But that was not all. He witnessed colors and shades that his words could not describe. After crossing the seventh sphere, the prophet reached a place called the Beit ul-Ma'mur. This place was considered a pilgrimage site for numerous angels who performed a ritual here, similar to the pilgrimage to the Kaaba in the earthly realm. Thus, an unimaginable number of angels continuously and alternately visited this place to fulfill their ritual. Upon closer examination of the prophet's accounts, this place seems to be a kind of parallel world to the earthly pilgrimage site, perhaps even the ritual center of all dimensions. Eventually, Prophet Muhammad reached the Sidrat al-Muntaha, the tree at the utmost boundary that no one can surpass. From this point forward, the Archangel Gabriel appeared to him in a completely different form, in his true form, as the prophet later explained. The dimension they were already in, which was inexplicable, seemed to have evolved into something entirely different. At this mystical place, Archangel Gabriel told Prophet Muhammad that he could no longer accompany him. Continuing his companionship would mean Gabriel's annihilation. The prophet continued his journey alone. On the way to the secret of all secrets, the prophet heard the sound of a writing pen, whose volume conquered the entire dimension with its resonance. Finally, the prophet reached the place, if one may say so, where the eternal, the infinite, the almighty, and the all-knowing existed independently of space, time, and all possible dimensions. He was there, as if his being had no beginning and no end. His existence made the prophet understand more that he always existed and will always exist. Time played no role, the place was no place, and the dimension was, in the truest sense of the word, pure truth. In these mystical moments, a beauty unfolded beyond our earthly imagination. The prophet was confronted with a reality that transcended our senses and challenged our understanding. It was a moment of revelation, where the divine merged with the human, and the boundaries of knowledge blurred. Whether the prophet saw or could see the Almighty God is not precisely known to this day. What is certain, however, is that he was confronted with the pure existence and reality of God. The act of looking at him, or the ability to see him, seems, in this case, to undergo a kind of definition. God is often described as a transcendent entity that exists beyond our conception of space and time. This implies that he is not bound by the limitations and constraints present in our physical reality. His existence extends beyond all dimensions we can imagine, and even those that are entirely unknown to us. In his independence from the familiar physical laws, the concept arises that God is not influenced by the rules that govern our world. He is not bound by the laws of physics or nature that apply to us. Instead, he is the source of these laws, the origin of everything that exists. God is not confined to a single dimension or reality. He is not limited to a specific spatial or temporal extent, but is rather capable of encompassing all dimensions and periods of time. This implies that he can be present simultaneously in the past, present, and future, without being bound by the linear sequence of events. Everything that happened is happening, and will happen in our reality has already occurred for the Almighty God. We, as humans, must wait for the linear sequence of events to unfold and experience them before we can realize and label them as happening. This is precisely the basis for destiny or predestination. When the prophet was confronted with the existence of God, he could understand and comprehend all of it better than ever. After this unforgettable journey, the prophet shared his experiences with his companions, but he admitted that some impressions were so overwhelming that their splendor and depth could not be put into words. For the prophet, it was truly not easy. On one side stood the undeniable truth, the supernatural, and the acquired knowledge. But on the other side was ignorance, making it challenging for the believers. Under these circumstances, the believers were forced to leave Mecca and seek refuge in Medina. Initially, the weak and vulnerable Muslims moved to Medina in small groups. The situation intensified as it reached a threatening point. The idolaters were planning a nighttime attack, an assassination, on the Prophet. Amidst this danger, Prophet Muhammad received a revelation to migrate. On a quiet night, he left the city with his faithful companion Abu Bakr, while his cousin Ali lay in the Prophet's bed as a decoy.
Behold, he lies in his bed. Let us enter and bring this matter to a final close.